Voters in Iowa are preparing to be the first in the nation to weigh in on the 2016 presidential election. The Iowa caucuses take place Monday. New Hampshire will hold the nation's first primary February 9th. Earlier this week, we talked with Nebraska Extension Public Policy Specialist Brad Lubben to look at the role agriculture has played so far in the primary election, including to the east in the country's largest ethanol producing state.
It's interesting to see how little has really been discussed about ag. It always starts in Iowa, and you always think agriculture has to be one of the hot issues, but we've had so many other topics on the plate and so much debate about who's in this race and who's not, that the fundamental questions about ag are pretty few and far between.
Does that mean that ag hasn't mattered so far?
It's debatable as to whether Iowa really matters as much as it used to, and it's debatable as to how much Iowa cares about ag when it has that contest as well. Ag still matters, sure. We saw almost every candidate sort of espouse their position on ethanol. It's been the big topic of the last few months, particularly with EPA's long-standing or long-awaited announcement. But ethanol sort of became the litmus test for, are you for ag or are you for industry or are you for government regulation? Ethanol became a testing point. But relatively few other topics in ag have been on the radar yet.
What's ethanol's role beyond the Iowa caucus?
It's unclear as to how long that remains the focal issue. Think of the first three debates. You go from Iowa to New Hampshire to South Carolina. We may not talk about ag again until you get into some of the spring primaries or even into the general election. So ag issues matter, but it's unclear as to how much they matter in this fairly polarized primary campaign.
One of the other topics that has got to mention is crop insurance,
right,
because of the vote towards the end of last year. Tell
right,
me what role it plays.
Well, crop insurance, if we look back to farm program legislation, one of the reasons we haven't talked as much about farm policy perhaps is we're not in the middle of a farm bill debate. But yet crop insurance, we know when the next farm bill debate comes around, and even before then, crop insurance has become a target of political discussion. In part, large part, because it has become the biggest part of the safety net. So it's the biggest chunk of that commodity program and crop insurance title, the biggest chunk of the safety net to talk about. So crop insurance is a target. It becomes something of a litmus test of how much are you for government, a government role or for less government.
With TPP now sort of at the front of the plate here, how much should trade be a focus for agriculture?
Trade has to be a huge focus for ag. Clearly the trade debate is not just about ag, and ag's a relatively, you might say in the end, ag might be a small part of the overall debate on whether TPP goes forward or whether candidates are for or against trade. So ag is less important to the trade battle than maybe we think, but the trade battle is clearly very important to ag. Ag can't sort of afford to divorce itself from that discussion.
And illegal immigration is one a topic that has obviously been fierily debated in the past.
Right.
And ag groups have taken a stance on it, but we haven't heard much about it in the primary.
Well, we haven't heard much about immigration reform because it seems every attempt thus far in D.C. at any sort of reform has run into a stalemate. Until you can sort out primary voters that have arguably taken more polarized positions on the issue, until you can sort out who your candidates really are, it's kind of hard to imagine that any sort of middle ground reform is even possible. In some sense, that's true on almost all of these issues. The primary campaign is where you tend to find more polarized discussion between the parties and frankly even amongst candidates within each party. Once you settle on a candidate, then those candidates start to craft positions that are more attuned to the mainstream.